Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 245 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is who you are. Our quote of the day comes to us from Dolly Parton. Find out who you are and do it on purpose. As a professional speaker, I'm thrilled to bring you today's episode. Our guest is an author, a speaker, as well as a very successful podcast host himself. Grant Baldwin delivers a lot of powerful and useful information with us today. One concept I absolutely loved is how he defines simple versus easy. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Grant, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Chris, thanks for letting me hang out with you, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
Let's bring it. Let's go.
So the number one objective of our show is to both motivate and inspire listeners. And I was curious if you have either a no-quit story yourself or maybe a really challenging time where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Yeah, I would say, especially early on in my speaking career. So the long story short, I was a youth pastor for a little while, working at a local church, and had a lot of opportunities to speak. I really enjoyed it, wanted to do more of it, but just had no idea where to begin. And so at the time, my wife, while we were working in this career role as a youth pastor, my wife was a couple months pregnant, and we were kind of figuring out, like, is this really what we want to do? What would we rather be doing, and what would that look like? And ultimately decided, like, I wanted to pursue a career as a speaker. And so that's not the type of thing that you just quit on a Friday, say, all right, I'm out of this thing, I'm gonna chase this dream, and you have a full schedule on Monday of speaking gigs. It just doesn't work like that. So but ultimately decided, like, all right, let's give this a shot. And so quit that role when I was when my wife was 5 months pregnant. Didn't have any like significant savings or any like big job lined up. It was just like, hey, we want to do this, and we know it's going to take work. We know it's going to take sacrifice, and it's going to take effort. And so as we slowly built that, I knew there were plenty of times where I'm just like, what am I doing? People, well-meaning people asking, hey, have you thought this through? Like, just go get go find another traditional job or something. But I knew, like, no, the speaking thing is the thing I'm passionate about, the thing I'm interested in. And so there were plenty of times where it's just like, why am I doing this? This is, this whole thing could be a complete failure. It could be a complete disaster. But I knew, like, this is the thing I wanted to chase. And thankfully it's worked out.
I love that. I think it's so important to chase a passion, and I think so many people, unfortunately, get into a job where they do it for different reasons, and ultimately down the road, they have those woulda, coulda, shoulda moments where they said, I really wanted to do X or Y, so I'm glad you touched on that. So I wanted to ask you if you wouldn't mind telling our listeners just a little bit about who you are and what you're doing today.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I've been in the speaking industry for over a decade now. Was a full-time speaker for several years, was doing 60, 70 gigs a year. And the challenge of speaking is that I remember a friend telling me one time, it's a high-paying manual labor job in that we get paid way too well to stand on stage and run our mouths. But the nature of speaking is that you have to leave your family, you have to get on a plane, you have to go somewhere. And so I got to a point where I was on the upper end of how many gigs I wanted to be doing. And I started having a lot of people ask me, hey, I want to be a speaker. How would I go about doing that? And some people who'd want to do it full-time, and other people would want to do just a few gigs here and there. And I felt like we'd built some good systems and structure for actually going about and finding and booking gigs. And so we started teaching some of that, and that's really taken off in the past several years. So that's the core of what we do today. So our company is the Speaker Lab, and we teach people how to find and book gigs.
I love it. And also need to share with our listeners, and we'll touch on it in a bit, is Grant also is a author. He just came out with a fantastic book, The Successful Speaker, with him as well as Jeff Goins. But you are also a podcast host as well. So you do the speaking, you do the writing, and you do the podcast. So I don't think you do enough as it is.
All of the above, all the things, and I think that what's important to note here is that there, like as entrepreneurs, there's no shortage of things that we could do, and so part of what you have to do is be able to pick and choose what you're best at, what you feel like has the highest impact and ROI on your time, but also just learning to say no to good opportunities and good things. There's plenty of things within our business right now that we could do, that I see other people doing, that I see like we're probably leaving money on the table by not doing those things. But recognizing again that you cannot do everything, so don't try to do everything. Pick and choose the things strategically that you can be the best at.
I think that's really important that you mentioned that. And I think it goes along the lines. I know there's an adage, and lots of people have spoken about it. If you say yes to something, then ultimately you're saying no to something else. So I think it's important, as you said, to pick and choose. And it's not just about the money. And as you mentioned, you probably are leaving some money on the table in different things. But the reality is, it's because you're doing the projects and the things that you really and truly want to do. And it goes back to what you said originally, which is you're following something that you're really passionate about.
Yeah, very much so.
So, interesting question I ask our guests is, if you had to define yourself, but you could only use one word, what word would you pick?
I would hyphenated 2 words, a do husband, father. Those are the things that really matter to me. Like I love being an entrepreneur. I love being a speaker. But I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We got 3 beautiful daughters. So it's me and a house full of women. It's the best. And so I love what I get to do as an entrepreneur. I love, the hustle and the grind of it. And I'm a very, motivated and driven guy. But one of the things that I've done some speaking on is that who you are is more important than what you do. Meaning that if we're great entrepreneurs, if we're great podcasters, if we're great authors, speakers, fill in the blank with whatever it is that we do on a day-to-day basis, if we're great at that, but we drop the ball as husbands, wives, moms, dads, if we're the shell of a human being, then we're doing it wrong. So I absolutely want to make a dent in the world as an entrepreneur, but it's really important to me to be a good husband and a good father.
I was just actually going to pose a question geared towards that, because I've seen quite a few videos where you do touch on that, and I think it's very powerful, and it goes along the lines of a follow-up question, which I ask everybody is, how do you personally define success, or what does success mean to you?
Yeah, I think one of the great things about success is that you get to define the rules of the game, right? So I think, whenever you look at entrepreneurship, for example, I think it's easy to look at what everybody else is doing, and I'm no different. Like I'm not immune to this. It's easy to, compare myself to other people of wow, their business seems more successful, or it seems like they're doing better, or they've accomplished more things, or fill in the blank. Looking at someone's Facebook feed or Instagram or whatever it may be, but also recognizing that they may be playing a completely different game. So kind of reminds me, my wife and I, we've done a couple of marathons and half marathons, and so if you've ever done like a long distance race like that, like at the beginning there's a lot of adrenaline and excitement and energy, and so a lot of times people just go sprinting out of the gate. You're just excited about this. We're doing it. We've been practicing and training for this for weeks or months, and now here it is. Let's go. And I try to remind myself, like, if you go too fast in the beginning, you just burn out and you're exhausted. You hit a wall by the end. So you really, really, really have to pace yourself. So sometimes when we've done these races, and we're not fast at all, but we see people just go flying by us, and you're tempted to kind of like try to keep up with them, sort of thing. And I always try to remind myself, like, no, like you run your race, let them run their race. Like it's okay. So they can go super, super fast, and I can go at my pace, and someone else can go slower than us, and that it can all be successful. So it's not that one's better or worse than the other. So ultimately, I'd say the big thing is that you get to define the rules for what matters to you. So for me, the things that are really important, significant for us, are things like freedom, autonomy, flexibility, those things especially, like, really, really make a difference of being able to like kind of pick and choose of what life looks like on any given day.
No, and I think how you touched on that is really, it's so important to define it for yourself. And I think the question we ask it's an interesting question, but I love it because there is no right or wrong answer. And I think how you prefaced it is just perfect, because it's all about running your own race, and it's your rules for your game. And I think so many people look at, keeping up with the Joneses or what somebody else is doing. And like you said, is they might be playing a completely different game. They might be running in a completely different race. So maybe you're running a marathon, 26.2 miles, but maybe they're only running, a 3K, which is why they're flying down there. So I appreciate you touching on that. One of the things that we've become fascinated over the last probably 100 or so episodes is the importance of a morning routine. And I was curious if you have a morning routine that you swear by.
Sometimes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do. I go to the gym. I go to there's this men's strength class I go to with an entrepreneur buddy of mine, and so we do that every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 a.m. It's a group of 6-7 guys or so who we're all just trying to avoid dad bod and trying to stay in decent shape. So that's a big thing I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But yeah, Tuesday, Thursday, it can be hit and miss. But I try to spend time with the family. My wife homeschools our daughters, and so it has its pros and cons in terms of like we're together all the time. But the downside is that we're together all the time, and so I work from the house, and the girls are here all the time. So I try to just spend some quality time with hanging out with them before I jump into work. But yeah, so that tends to be what most mornings look like.
So got to change lanes here towards your book, The Successful Speaker. So I have to ask this question because I always ask it for authors, is so many people talk about wanting to write a book or having this desire. What was the difference of thinking about it, wanting to do it versus going ahead and actually doing it?
Yeah, so the difference is that you mentioned I worked with my friend Jeff Goins, and so I had actually, when I was doing a lot of speaking, I'd self-published a book years ago and had written every single word of it and had found the ISBN number and got the barcode and put it all together on the editing and the printing. And it is a lot of work. While I recognize the value of a book, it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. There's value in having a book. There's value in doing lots of things, but it doesn't mean you have to do them or you should do them. And so I don't necessarily, writing's not my favorite thing. And so, so Jeff we've been friends for several years, and he had texted a couple years ago and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I was like, I don't know, maybe, sort of, not really, I don't know, who knows, sort of thing. It just, I see the value just wasn't high on the priority list. And so he said, we kind of went back and forth about it, talking about it. And he said, I got an idea. What if we do this? You already have all this content and knowledge around the speaking space. You have all this intellectual property. You have all these case studies and examples and course material and podcast interviews and connections and yada, yada, yada. He said, what if I take that stuff and I turn it into a book and we work together on the project? And so that's ultimately what we did. Is Jeff was basically a named ghostwriter on the project. And Jeff has written and published several books. He's a very, very good writer, very prolific writer. He knows the publishing space really, really well. And so we work together on it. So it's all my content and IP, and Jeff was the one that made it look and sound pretty.
I think that's remarkable because it's about people working together, and obviously you've done the whole thing yourself, and opportunity to do it with somebody else and share some of the work, but the value. But I want to just touch on one thing for our listeners is I think the power of this book is it's something that you were passionate about, getting up on stage and having a speaking career, which obviously you've done to a successful level. But what I love about your book is now you're paying it forward in the sense of giving it the advice to the people that want to do what you're doing. So whether you're looking to take it to the next level or looking to start it or really want to get into it, it's almost that handbook to how to do it. And I think so many people miss the value in being able to pay it forward for others. So I just wanted to commend you for that, because like I said, a lot of people do their own thing and kind of continue along the way. And this is a very, very fascinating book for people that are looking to become a professional speaker.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words, and it's a lot of what I wish I had when I got started. So, I was looking for a podcast that taught some of this stuff. I was looking for any type of blog post, looking for any type of resources or any type of book, anything where I could learn how to find and book speaking gigs. And they're just, at the time, was pretty limited on the options available. And so we've tried to we found a lot of people who are in that similar spot as I was. Of one of the things we say all the time is I felt like I had the potential, but I needed the plan. I had the potential, but I needed the plan. I enjoyed speaking, felt like I was a decent speaker, wanted to do more speaking, zero clue what to do from there. And so if the book helps people to overcome that challenge of going, I know I can do this, I just need someone to show me how, then that's definitely a big win.
Yeah, no, and I think it's something we talk about often, which is paying it forward, and you laid the ground rules of what it is to do. And I think one of the things you just touched on is you said it's a lot of what I wish I had when you had started. And I think that's something that I tend to ask people if I get an opportunity to have a conversation with them is, what is something or the 2 or 3 things you wish you knew before you started? And I think that's a great question, because obviously it's something that you could do differently, and you're just laying down the ground rules for this. So I want to change lanes for a minute in regards to something that we talk about quite often is the word accountability. And I just wanted to get your perspective on what accountability means to you.
Yeah, so I'm good friends with several guys who are entrepreneurs, and there's four of us that are in kind of a mastermind accountability type group. And one of the things that's been really valuable is a place where we can compare notes and talk and see what everybody else is up to, but also continue to challenge and push one another. And so that group and no one in there wants, everyone has their own business and everyone's doing similar models but different industries, but chance just to be able to compare notes and hang out with those guys has been incredibly valuable. And so it just pushes you as well, because nobody wants to be the weak link. Everyone wants to keep making a significant impact and growing their business. So that group has been really, really accountable, or really, really beneficial for accountability.
How often do you guys get together?
Well, we do a lot with Voxer, which is if people aren't familiar, it's kind of almost like a walkie-talkie app. And so we talk on a daily basis. We've got two of us live here in the Nashville area. One of the guys is in Kentucky. One of the guys is in St. Louis. And so we're all kind of somewhat regional. But we usually get together once or twice a year in person. Each year we do a houseboat trip. We've been doing this for I think this will be our 5th year coming up, where we'll get a houseboat and 4, 5, 6 of us will go out on a lake and just hang out for a couple of days. And we'll talk business and we'll talk life and talk what it is to be a husband and be a father. And so that's really, really valuable.
That's awesome. I have a personal follow-up question. Is I run a couple groups, accountability groups, and I have a couple accountability partners. And the question I get asked often, and I want to ask you, is how do you find, or how do you know the right people to have in your either accountability group or whatever group you have?
Yeah, I think it starts by really getting clear on what's the purpose of the group. So different people have different skill sets that they bring to the table. So for this particular group of guys, it's kind of twofold. One of it is, first part is the entrepreneurship part, but I don't think that's the actual important part. Like, I think bigger than that, it's more important to us just like who you are as a person. And so we look for guys who are also husbands, who are fathers. We have we're all come from like a faith perspective, and so that's something that's important to us, valuable to us. And so I think those things are really more important than the entrepreneurship part, because there's certainly people who are really, really successful, but if they don't, they're not at a similar or at a different stage of life and don't really share the same values, then it doesn't really align well. So I think for anyone starting some type of accountability group or mastermind, whatever, first just getting really, really, really clear on what's the goal and what's the purpose of it and what type of people fit that model that you're looking for.
I think it's really key what you said is getting really clear, and it's something that I talk quite often with my clients about, is really getting clear with whether it's your goals or objectives and the starting point. And I think a lot of times people have this goal or objective and they reverse engineer, which is important, but I think you really have to drill down and to your point, get as clear as you can and as specific as you can.
Right, very much so.
So if you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, and assuming the 20-year-old version would have listened, what would you have given yourself as far as advice?
Yeah, I'd say one thing would just be like, have a really long-term perspective on this. I think sometimes when we're again motivated, driven, you want success, whatever success looks like, we just think like, man, I just snap my fingers, or I think about it, or I click my heels together, and it all just magically works out. And it just doesn't work like that. Like it takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy. And so I've been in the speaking industry for 13, 14 years at this point. And I feel like we have some level of success, but I also know like there's more meat on the bone, and there's more opportunity for us to pursue. And so just continue to have like a long-term perspective that it's very much a marathon and not a sprint.
No, I love that. Everything is a marathon as opposed to a sprint. I think sometimes we all get distracted. I wanted to ask you: is there one guiding principle you feel that has influenced your success the most?
I definitely think about, that idea we talked about earlier, that who you are is more important than what you do. That's a big thing that's been influential for me. Another thing I would say would be, that everything that we do within our business, just in general, is simple, but it's not easy. Simple, but not easy. So it's kind of like, if you wanted to lose weight, what do you need to do? Well, it really comes down to, you need to do two things. You need to pay attention to what you eat, and you need to exercise. Like, that's really it, right? It's really, really simple, but it's not easy. And so just the discipline, the dedication, the commitment, day in and day out, to just do the work. Like, I feel like that's, if we've had any level of success, it's because of that. It's just day in and day out. We're just showing up and doing the work, having a long-term perspective, recognizing that it's simple, but it's not easy. You still got to do still have to do the work and put in the effort.
I think that's great advice, and I know Mel Robbins talks about that quite often, the concept of simple versus easy, and I'm glad you touch on that. So for our listeners and those who want to follow you and find out more about you, not only the book but your podcast as well as you professionally, what's the best way for them to do that, and are you active on social media?
Yeah, everything that we do is over at thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com. The podcast is by the same name, the Speaker Lab Podcast. Like you mentioned, the book is The Successful Speaker, 5 Steps for Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, Building Your Platform. The book is out now everywhere books are sold. And yeah, we're on social media. I think at Grant Baldwin on Twitter, at G Baldwin on Instagram. But yeah, those are the main places we're around.
Awesome. And then last question for you is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Yeah, I would go back to a couple of things that we've touched on. Again, the who you are is more important than what you do. Having a long-term perspective, and remember that you can do this. You can be successful, but it's simple, but it's not easy. It still requires work, still requires effort. But if you're willing to do the work, then you can absolutely see results.
I love it. I love it. Advice that hits with our No Quit tribe. Grant, I truly appreciate your time today. I loved what you shared, and I would definitely recommend our listeners checking you out, following your stuff, and getting a copy of your book for anybody that wants to be a speaker. And I hope that you and I can connect again soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for listening to episode number 245. Grant definitely delivered on today's episode, and he personally made me think about the way in which I approach both my career as well as my life. Grant stressed quite a few times that who we are is more important than what you are. I've never really thought about that idea, but the way in which he described it I thought was extremely powerful. Grant reminded us that life is not a sprint, but it is actually a marathon, and we should look at it and approach it with a long-term perspective. So as you go for your greatness today, no matter what your goal or objective is, remember that you can do this. You can be successful. The concept is simple, but it's not easy. As long as you do the work, show up, and don't quit, you got this. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.